Okay, let's unpack this. You know how some words just seem to vibrate with hidden meaning, like they have secret histories buried beneath the surface?
Absolutely, they invite curiosity, suggesting there's something more going on than the everyday definition.
Well, today we are diving deep into a word that practically defines hidden layers, secret histories, and contested meanings. Esoteric.
Ah, yes. It's a word that immediately sparks different thoughts for people. Maybe ancient mysteries, closed groups, perhaps something a bit spooky or just, well, incredibly complex.
Exactly. And to really get a handle on what this word means, where it comes from, and why it means such different things to different people, we've pulled together, a fascinating stack of sources for this deep dive. We've got academic articles, standard dictionary definitions, even perspectives from different spiritual traditions that really challenged the common understanding.
Right. So our mission then is to trace the journey of esoteric, from its ancient roots right up to how it's understood and maybe misunderstood today. We'll look at its history, its relationship to other concepts, and see how these ideas actually play out in the real world.
Prepare for some unexpected connections and hopefully a few aha moments.
Yeah.
Let's jump in, starting at the very beginning, right? The source.
The word esoteric has deep roots, stretching back to ancient Greek. It comes from words like iso and aso,
Okay.
which directly translate to within or inner.
So right there, the core idea is about something internal, something on the inside.
Precisely. And there's esoteros, meaning inner or internal. But here's a really interesting layer from the etymology. There's also a potential connection to the Greek word ekos.
Eikos, what does that mean?
It means is natural.
Huh. Inner and natural.
Yeah.
That pairing already seems to hold some tension, doesn't it? With the common idea of esoteric as something obscure or unnatural to most people.
It really does. This foundational idea of the inner stands in direct contrast to the exoteric.
Right, the opposite.
Yeah, that word comes from the Greek exa, meaning outside. So the most basic linguistic split is inner versus outer.
And when we look at how dictionaries define esoteric today, like the Macquarie Dictionary mentioned in our sources, we still see that inner-outer distinction, but often with a strong emphasis on exclusivity. The definitions include things like understood by or meant for a select few, profound, recondite.
Which just means difficult to understand, basically.
Also belonging to the select few, private, secret, and confidential.
What's striking about those modern definitions is how heavily they lean into the idea of limited access, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's for the select few, it's secret, it's private. It seems the common understanding has really solidified around this idea of exclusivity.
Okay, so the foundation is inner versus outer, often implying a group with special access. But this concept isn't new. The idea of an inner select group with reserved knowledge goes way, way back in history, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Our sources point to the Pythagoreans in ancient Greece as a classic historical example. They weren't, one homogeneous group. Accounts describe divisions among their disciples.
And there's a distinct inner circle.
Yes. According to some historical accounts the sources discuss, after a period of rigorous probation and being judged worthy, only the esoterikoi were considered intimates of Pythagoras himself.
The esoterikoi, the inner ones.
Exactly. They were allowed to hear his teachings within the curtain, sometimes literally separated by a veil, while others, the exoterikoi, only heard generalized principles without the deeper explanations.
A literal curtain dividing the inner from the outer. It's quite a visual. And those who didn't make the cut, the ones deemed not worthy, they were reportedly treated as dead.
That's what the historical account suggests, yes. It's a pretty stark illustration of that division into inner and outer circles, with access to the profound teaching restricted and dependent on a person's perceived readiness or worthiness.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This isn't just an ancient Greek philosophical thing. This insider-outsider dynamic, this idea of reserved knowledge for a select group, pops up in places you might not expect, like the New Testament.
It's true. Consider Jesus speaking to his 12 apostles privately. He says, the mystery of the kingdom of God has been granted to you, but to those outside, everything comes in parables.
So the parables, while seemingly open, acted as a kind of veil for those outside.
Exactly. Other gospels have similar ideas, speaking of those left behind, the remainder.
And the Apostle Paul even uses terms that echo the Greek roots, 2x the ones outside and 2s the ones inside.
Right, when he's discussing judging people within the community versus those outside.
Yeah, 1 Corinthians. There's even the, well, frankly, terrifying reference to being banished to to skotos to exoto and outer darkness.
So this principle of reserving certain teachings or experiences seems present in various historical and religious contexts. This raises an important question. Why? Why would knowledge or understanding be reserved?
Good question.
Well, the sources suggest several potential reasons. It could be out of respect, protecting sacred things from being treated profanely. Perhaps secret teaching requires significant preparation or maturity to be properly understood. Or maybe.
Or the idea that one must demonstrate a certain worthiness to receive something holy or profound.
But there's a fascinating tension here, isn't there? While some passages in the Gospels highlight concealment or reservation, others, particularly in Mark and Luke, suggest that any hiding is only temporary. Nothing is secret except to come to light. That's Mark 4.22.
Right.
And Matthew has Jesus saying what is said in darkness, even whispered privately, should eventually be proclaimed loudly from the housetops.
That's a crucial point. It suggests that perhaps the esoteric knowledge isn't meant to be permanently hidden, but reserved until the time is right, or maybe until the recipient is ready. The Gospel of John adds another layer. It's not always about information being hidden from you, but about your own capacity to perceive it.
Oh, okay.
Truth can be spoken openly in plain sight, but remain invisible or unintelligible to those who lack the necessary belief or inner quality or perspective to truly see or understand it. In John 10.
So the barrier isn't just external concealment. It can be internal, a lack of capacity. Exactly. The barrier isn't just a locked door. It can be a lack of vision in the person trying to look through it.
That's a great insight. So the concept of inner circles and reserved knowledge has deep roots and different motivations. Okay, let's fast forward to modern interpretations, which get quite complex.
Indeed. A significant modern figure who developed a very specific and hierarchical model of how humanity relates to hidden knowledge is G.I. Gurdjieff.
Gurdjieff, right.
He described humanity as structured in several concentric circles, each representing a different level of development and understanding.
Not just inner and outer, then, but multiple distinct layers.
Exactly. At the very center is the esoteric circle, representing the highest human development, where individuals possess full knowledge and the capacity to act in accordance with it.
Okay, the peak.
Moving outwards, there's the mesoteric circle. Its members have knowledge that is more theoretical, they understand it, but maybe haven't fully integrated it into their being and action.
Still highly knowledgeable, but perhaps not living it completely yet.
Correct. Then comes the exoteric circle. Now, this is important in Gurdjieff's system. The exoteric circle is not ordinary humanity. It's the outer circle of the inner part of humanity. Their cosmic knowledge is more philosophical or abstract contemplation, still very distinct from typical daily life. For most ordinary people, encountering the ideas of the exoteric circle would already feel like encountering something esoteric.
Okay, so Gurdjieff's exoteric is already pretty far removed from the average person on the street.
Got it. Precisely. And finally, outside all these inner circles is the outer circle, which is mechanical humanity, what most of us experience as ordinary life, driven by external influences and automatism.
His system also had strict ideas about how knowledge is transmitted.
Right.
Or we may not transmit it.
Yes, he emphasized that students in his system couldn't simply share what they learned with others. Doing so, he believed, would inevitably lead to distortion and misunderstanding, potentially preventing others from later accessing the ideas properly through the intended channels. He also saw silence and the inability to speak about certain things as a tool for self-mastery and internal development. It sort of echoes that historical idea of probation and worthiness in a way.
And he talked about different kinds of influences shaping human life.
He did. He described influences of the second kind as originating from the esoteric center. These are conscious, intentional influences like genuine religious systems, profound philosophy, true art.
Okay, conscious influences.
These influences enter ordinary life, which he saw as being dominated by influences of the first kind, things like race, nation, societal trends, just accidental circumstances.
So conscious influences from the inner circles attempt to penetrate the mechanical outer circle.
That's the idea. But Gurdjieff argued that as these influences of the second kind enter the general flow of ordinary life, they fall under the law of accident and tend to act mechanically themselves. They get distorted, diluted, merged with the unconscious influences.
So they lose their potency.
Unless a person develops a special capacity, what he called a magnetic center, which allows them to discriminate and choose these conscious influences, to sort of pick them out from the noise.
That's a really intricate hierarchical model of esotericism a clear structure of inner levels and specific rules for transmission.
Yeah.
Now, here's a fascinating contrast. A perspective that completely flips the script on that common dictionary definition we started with.
Yes, one of our sources, Unimed Living, presents a radical departure from the idea of esoteric as secret knowledge for a select few.
They call the common definition a bastardization of the word's true meaning. That's strong language.
It is. And they base this claim on returning to those original Greek roots we discussed, inner and, crucially, natural, eikos.
Bringing back that natural connection we noted earlier.
Exactly. According to this perspective, the true energetic meaning of esoteric is not about hidden information, but about a state of being, the livingness of our innermost.
The livingness of our innermost. So it's about connecting to your deepest self, your inner core. Is that the idea?
Precisely. This source argues that everyone, by their very nature, is esoteric because it simply means connecting to and living from this inner core, which they see as natural and inherent to everyone.
So not exclusive at all. Universal.
Exactly. It's not exclusive. It's not hidden. It's simply the truth of who we are when we live from our authentic inner nature.
So they're saying the word's meaning was fundamentally corrupted. And they have a theory about why.
Yes, they suggest this original universal meaning that the esoteric is our natural inner core was deliberately changed over time.
Deliberately?
The theory presented is that institutions, perhaps like the church historically, were concerned about losing authority and control if people realized they could connect directly to their own inner divine essence,
Wow.
which this source equates to simply we are love, found in the inner heart rather than needing external dogma, hierarchy, or intermediaries.
Wow. So you have this perspective arguing the word esoteric was deliberately twisted from describing a universal natural potential within everyone into describing something exclusive, secret, and hard to access, potentially as a means of control.
Yes.
That stands in stark contrast to the dictionary definitions and those historical examples of reserved knowledge we discussed.
It highlights a core tension and debate around the word today. Is esotericism fundamentally about exclusivity and secrets passed down through lineages? Or is it about accessing something inherent and natural within everyone, which has perhaps been obscured or deliberately hidden by external structures?
That tension between exclusivity and universality is a really key takeaway here. Speaking of different understandings and related concepts, the sources also touch on how esoteric relates to terms like occult and magic. People sometimes use these words interchangeably, don't they?
They do, and dictionaries can sometimes group them together. But the Azai's article we drew from explores potential distinctions and nuances. It suggests that occult might carry a slightly more negative or unsavory nuance, potentially linked historically to ideas of hell or habitual concealment, whereas esoteric was more strongly associated with the, let's say, initiated status of Pythagorean disciples.
And the article contrasts figures like Gurdjieff, who it positions as a mystic and esotericist in his own developed sense, with someone like Aleister Crowley.
Crowley, right. He famously preferred the term magic with the K to distinguish it.
Magic with a K.
Yes. He defined magic very broadly, essentially as the work of becoming a spiritual being or aligning one's will with the cosmic will. He actively worked to rehabilitate the term magic and associated it strongly with his own practices and philosophy.
Interesting.
The sources note that his approach often blurred the line between formal magic ritual and everyday action or thought. He essentially sought to assimilate the exoteric daily life into the realm of the esoteric magical in his system.
So for Crowley, the distinction between outer ordinary life and inner spiritual work was perhaps less rigid than in some other systems, more integrated.
It seems he aimed to infuse the outer life with the principles of the inner will, yeah. The article suggests that occult might still be a better descriptive term for those primarily focused on practices like ceremonial magic, astrology, or alchemy.
Right.
Implying a potential real difference in the focus or methods compared to what's typically meant by esoteric, especially in its historical context of inner philosophical or spiritual understanding rather than, say, practical arts.
An interesting nuance there. The sources also mention an academic attempt to formally define esotericism itself, right? Trying to pin it down.
Yes, there's a model that proposes a definition based on a set of characteristics. It lists 4 intrinsic characteristics correspondences, like as above, so below, living nature, seeing the cosmos as alive, imagination mediation, using inner faculties, and transmutation, personal transformation.
Okay.
And then adds 2 secondary ones. Concordance, finding common threads across traditions, and transmission initiation, the passing down of teachings.
And there's a critique highlighted in the sources regarding that model.
There is. The critique points out what feels like a counterintuitive ordering, that transmission, the passing down of teaching from master to disciple, the very thing central to the historical examples like the Pythagoreans and even the New Testament discussions of what's for those inside.
Yeah, that seems key.
Is listed as a secondary characteristic in this academic definition.
It does seem odd to make transmission secondary when so many historical understandings of the esoteric are built on that very idea of initiated knowledge passed down.
Exactly.
This shows that even within academic study, the definition and essential components of esotericism are debated. It's not settled.
Exactly. The definition isn't settled, reflecting the different ways the concept has manifested historically and is understood today.
Okay, so to bring this concept out of abstract definitions and historical texts and into the real world, our sources give us a concrete example. Mount Shasta in California.
Right, Mount Shasta. It's presented as a site of what's called frontier esotericism and a major destination for spiritual tourism. It's a physical place where esoteric ideas are actively lived, experienced, and shaped by people today.
So pilgrims who journey there aren't just visiting. They're actively contributing to the mountain's perceived sacredness and esoteric significance.
Absolutely. They create and share narratives of personal encounter and spiritual ascent, actively imbuing the mountain with metaphysical meaning. They see it as, a cosmic ecosystem, a vortex energy spot, even home to hidden masters or a spiritual portal.
The famous story of Guy Ballard meeting the ascended master Saint-Germain on Mount Shasta in the 1930s, which led to the founding of the I Am Activity religious movement. That's a key example, isn't it?
It's a quintessential founder's tale, yes.
Right.
It follows that narrative pattern of encounter and ascent in a specific charged location, and such stories become foundational myths that perpetuate the idea of the mountain as a site of spiritual revelation and esoteric transmission for new communities.
And these kinds of pilgrim accounts and narratives, they trace back even to earlier visitors in the 19th century, leaving religious items on the summit. They show how personal experiences and the stories built around them shape the perception of a physical place as sacred.
Right. And how they transmit esoteric ideas through generations and communities. The idea is that places like Mount Shasta become enduring symbols of the esoteric, not just passively. They're involved in a kind of reciprocal meaningfulness with the pilgrims who visit.
Reciprocal meaningfulness, I like that.
It's seen as both a place to dwell and be rooted, and a place that facilitates a spiritual journey or route. It's a physical location that becomes a stage for the esoteric to be experienced, narrated, and passed on.
That brings the concept right down to earth, or rather, up a mountain in this case. It shows how ideas that might seem abstract actually live and breathe through people's experiences and the stories they tell about places.
It does. It makes the esoteric not just a definition or a historical practice, but a living part of contemporary spiritual landscape.
So what does this all mean when we look back at our sources and the journey we've taken? We've seen that esoteric is far from a simple word. It's packed with history and conflicting ideas.
We've seen it shift from ancient Greek notions of inner knowledge meant for select disciples, through historical examples in philosophy and religion, where restricted access was seen as necessary for various reasons.
Yeah.
We saw complex modern systems like Gurdjieff's hierarchical circles attempting to map these inner layers.
And then that completely contrasting view that challenges the conventional understanding, arguing the word's true meaning is the natural inner core universally accessible to everyone, suggesting the exclusivity is a corruption.
Right. We've also touched on its relationship and nuance difference with concepts like occult and magic, noting how those terms have their own histories and connotations, sometimes distinct from esoteric.
And we saw how these ideas aren't confined to text, but play out in the narratives, practices, and spiritual landscapes around a real place like Mount Shasta.
This deep dive really shows us that the meaning of a single word can indeed contain multitudes, layers of history, philosophy, different perspectives, and even controversy about its true significance.
Yeah.
It's not just about what's secret or exclusive, but why it might be reserved, how it's transmitted or not, and whether it represents an exclusive path for a few or a universal potential within everyone.
It makes you think about the nature of knowledge itself, doesn't it?
It really does.
Here's a final provocative thought for you to carry with you. If the esoteric truly means the innermost and is potentially natural to everyone, as one source suggests, does that mean the most profound wisdom isn't hidden from us in secret texts or societies, but simply hidden within us, waiting to be rediscovered and lived? Something to ponder on your own next deep dive.